Today's discussion will be presented in 3 sections, since we are recording it for a radio broadcast on Federal News Radio, part of the Federal News Network. You're welcome to post questions and comments during the session, and we'll try to answer them online. Now I'd like to introduce our moderator, Jason Miller, Executive Editor at Federal News Network.
Welcome to the discussion. My guests today are Harry Singh, the Chief Information Officer at the Bureau of Engraving and Printing at the Treasury Department, and Don Sherman, the Chief Technology Officer and Vice President of Product Marketing at Pegasystems. Harry, Don, welcome to the discussion.
Hello. Thanks, Jason.
Before we get started, let me set some context for our discussion. Agencies are under ever-increasing pressure to deliver outcomes and improve citizen services. Therefore, agencies need to develop new capabilities rapidly and be flexible to meet changing user needs as they tackle the government's most complex modernization challenges. So how can agencies be agile, flexible, and secure? What are some low-risk and innovative modernization approaches? Well, one common approach that we've seen over the last few years take hold is the concept of DevOps, or now DevSecOps. The idea is that agencies are continually developing and integrating new services while using automation to secure the code and data. The latest data from the Office of Management and Budget shows agencies are making progress in moving toward this agile goal. The administration says about 56% of all major IT products are using iterative or agile methodology for projects worth about $39 billion. That leaves about 44% either stuck in the waterfall technique, about $17 billion, or undefined by the agency, about $27 billion. Now, despite this move to agile or iterative development, agencies are taking, on average, more than 400 days to complete a project. One way to speed up delivery is through the use of automation and the application of robotics, artificial intelligence, and machine learning. A 2018 IBM Center for the Business of Government report says the adoption of AI systems represents an opportunity to take a serious look at the current IT infrastructure and to think holistically about modernization efforts. The authors state, through AI and cognitive computing, agencies will be able to augment their capabilities of their workforce by processing and learning from large amounts of disparate data across different systems in near real time. These systems also will be able to collect and interact with citizens and employees through natural language processing. Cognitive systems also allow public agencies to free up their workforce from tasks that are ripe for automation due to their structure and predictable nature. The end result, authors say, is AI systems will enable agencies to increase the speed at which transactions are processed by reprioritizing the assignment of tasks between humans and machines. And all of this, hopefully, will lead to better, faster, hopefully cheaper citizens and mission partners services. Harry, let me start with you. Talk a little bit about the IT modernization approach that you guys are using at Treasury and more specifically Bureau of Engraving and Printing.
So the BEP is really one of the very few manufacturing agencies, Jason, within the government space. So that results in sort of a hybrid of business systems, industrial control, SCADA systems. So then we're really working towards in two life cycles. One is a technology life cycle, which is your typical 3 to 5 year cycle. Then you have your industrial control SCADA cycle, which is about 20 to 25, 30 year cycle. So to balance that, on the business side, really our approach is really to get our stakeholders engaged. So, my team actually established a partnership council, which was really to engage users in the planning phase. How do we really not really hone in a technical change, but to get their buy-in to help us prioritize what the business needs are. And then we'll actually, take the principles of DevOps and change management to really, for a quicker delivery. Really, I wouldn't say that we had agile methodology. I would say we're sort of hybrid agile, but we've moved away from the waterfall. So which the Partnership Council has been really successful overall. And on the infrastructure side, our approach is how do you really reduce the technical debt and get rid of the legacy components. So that's where, we engage the vendors in, and get engaged as part of the acquisitions process to really reduce the technical debt and the legacy components from the enterprise.
It's interesting you bring up both sides, both SCADA and IT and OT as it's commonly referred, and they're very different, but as OT IT bleeds into OT, that creates another challenge as well, and I imagine that's why you went down that path of a partnership council.
Absolutely. I mean, that's overall in the change management, one of the challenges is really user adaption, right? To make the adaption easier, it's always good, I believe, and we believe as a team, that the stakeholder engagement from the beginning is important.
I think that's a huge point. And one of the things that we've seen both in the government sector and in the commercial sector that is a way to ensure that Agile becomes successful is the closer you bring the business stakeholder into the actual development and agile sprint process, right? So we work with a non-governmental agency actually in Australia, and they have implemented basically a case management program that's working across a variety of agencies inside the Australia government, basically around managing offenders coming out of prison and helping to ensure that these people actually get put on a path so they don't get back into prison. Complex process to deal with. They have to get a whole bunch of agencies bought in to really use this centralized case management system, and they were really struggling with one agency getting buy-in. And what they finally got was agreement from the CIO of that agency to come to the sprint stand-up every morning for 15 minutes a day. And by actually having the CIO, the business stakeholder for the agency involved, sent a huge message to everybody else on the team, right? That this wasn't something that was going to be done to them, but this was something that everybody needed to be participating in. And they instantly started getting much more progress. They were actually able to roll out a version of the software in a couple of weeks once they got that done. So that buy-in and making sure that your key stakeholders are on the team, as much through the process as you can, I think is hugely important.
I think another thing you touched upon was that I talked about the stakeholder engagement, but it's also the leadership buy-in.
Yeah.
So that's, if you get, as we moved and transitioned to more sort of a data-driven organization, that leadership buy-in from our director, Len Oliar, was key. He talked about at the town hall meeting, where, across 3 shifts, and that really, the message really gets into our stakeholders, users, and they were a lot more engaged.
It's interesting. It seems so simple, right? Get the stakeholders, the people who are going to use the technology, the people who are part of it, get the leadership, and then we're all good to go. So maybe, Don, talk a little bit about, if you can, what you're seeing when you talk to your federal customers. If it's so easy, then why is it so hard?
Right. So I think there are a couple of things that make it challenging. One is, there is a lot of legacy technology in the federal government, right? There's lots of technology that needs to be modernized, that doesn't have the friendly API cloud services world, right? And so much of what people are seeing on the leadership level is this vision of a perfectly orchestrated set of APIs, which is really hard to do when you got a bunch of mainframes, right, where the only way to get at it is through a green screen. So there's a technology challenge there. But there's also a real sort of cultural shift that needs to happen inside a lot of these agencies in order to drive that. One is embracing Agile, right? And it's one thing to say, hey, we're going to do Agile development. It's another thing to actually put the Agile teams in place and build that cadence and that cycle. The things that I've seen work both in the federal and in the commercial space is organizations doing, and they're simple things, but they involve a little bit of risk-taking. Go take somebody off the floor, somebody who actually does the work day to day, and put them on the Agile team. Bring them in and say, look, you're going to learn a little bit about how we're developing this new application or developing this new, and you're going to be a daily contributor to that work. And now what you start doing is you start bringing that day-to-day experience from the end user viewpoint into it. That person also becomes your champion and your conduit back to the rest of the user population, and you're doing something good, which is you're actually helping an individual develop a new career opportunity for themselves. So there's win-win across a lot of this, but it takes making some of these pretty big sort of concrete moves in order to get it done.
Sure. I think, when you talk about IT modernization and automation, IT modernization is something CIO can drive.
Yep.
And when it comes to automation, that's really everything relates to process. So that's where the user engagement really comes into play. And Don, on that point, with our partnership council, which we established, we actually established 18-month roadmap. And the 18-month roadmap is not an IT-driven; it's user-driven.
That's great.
So that's been quite successful.
Since you brought up automation, let's go down that path a little bit. How is automation starting to play a role in the Bureau of Engraving and Printing?
I think it's really a foundation. On the business side, we're looking at laser-guided vehicles. As you move currency, within the facility across different production phases, and then people are looking at process robotics on the business side, right? Instead of mundane, day-to-day tasks, individual tasks, and then we're leveraging cloud, which is a quicker delivery not only user when they get engaged, they always want some tangible benefit. What's in it for me? That's the only reason they're going to be engaged. So with our partnership council, as I was talking about, we'll have periodic meetings just to make sure to reassess the priorities and have the users talk among themselves. We have manufacturing, SCADA, engineering teams. So they actually come to the table, have a dialogue, and reassess the priorities and tell us what do they really, what the needs are. On our end, it's really to use the agile methodology, the DevOps principles, to get the proof of concept established and really demonstrate the reiterations of the work we develop. So that's been really successful overall.
When you start talking automation, I mean, people think of robots, right? Well, a robot's going to take my job, and it's funny to talk about, but it's also a common fear. So does that, bringing the users in and having the technology people there, does that kind of alleviate some people kind of get that grasp of, okay, when we talk automation, it's this mundane thing that I can do over and over and over again, I no longer have to do. Do they get that, or do you have to show them what gets over the hump, I guess?
I think, this is my responsibility, right? And when users see automation, there's always sort of a threat feeling, right? Yeah. What happens to my job? Right. If you're going to get the laser-guided vehicles, now I take a forklift to move the currency, what's going to happen, right? But when you engage them and they see the process enhancements, and it's not that the position or the job goes away, it's really transitions over. So then you leverage the change management to make sure that you have proper training and delivery. So they understand it's not about their process or automation, which may result in a position or a skill set going away, but they may need to work on the skill set. So there may be a competency building or training, which they take, and the role shifts.
I think there's also, leveraging. So we, in our world, we're not building laser-guided vehicles from a robot perspective.
But if you did,
it'd be freaking cool. I'd be able to explain to my wife and my kids what I actually do. But the ability to use software robots, robotic process automation, where we've seen the fastest success with the least cultural pushback is thinking about robotic process automation not as let's throw a bunch of robots in a data center somewhere to replace a human, but let's look at the day-to-day experience of a user managing a slew of different legacy systems that they need to tab between. And how can I give that user a robot as an assistant to make it so that the mundane stuff of copying and pasting from this app over here to this app over there goes away? So we've had a lot of success at CMS using robots to drive claim processing and take some of the manual steps out of that. We put in robotics at the contact center of a major telecommunications company, and initial phase, we rolled this out in a couple of weeks, we had robots that did two things. The robot logged the people into the 10 systems they need to log into in the morning, which took about 10 minutes. And every time they got to the end of the call, instead of them having to tab and put notes in a whole bunch of different systems so they knew what had happened on the call, the robot collected all that information and automatically pushed it out, right? And the great thing about that was when those robots went live, the users in the floor of the contact center literally stood up and clapped because it wasn't hey, we're going to replace you. It's, no, we're going to let you focus and listen to your consumer or your constituent in a way that you never have before because we're taking away all this painful, mundane, navigate the system stuff that you don't want to do.
I think that's a huge point, taking away the painful mundaneness. So I remember there's an example that came out from a General Services Administration. They talked about the CFO's office, very similar, where they talked about the transactions, and this is just the same transactions over and over and over again. And when they started with one robot, and then let's add 5 robots, and then all of a sudden the RPA there's more demand than there is supply in many ways. So are you seeing that from your customers? Because having covered this market for 20 years now, which is I've seen a lot of change, but I don't think anything's gotten picked up like RPA has. At least it feels that way.
Yeah, I think it's because there are a couple of things about it that make it. One is it goes fast. The impact is visible. I think a lot of it, because RPA interfaces directly at the desktop and bypasses things like APIs and service level interfaces, it's much more accessible to the business to be able to just say, well, I'll describe what a user does on the desktop and then I'll put a robot in to do it. I think there's a thing though that I want organizations to be careful about. We love robotics. We're doing robotics at a number of agencies. But I also think it can't replace the broader end-to-end thinking about user and citizen and constituent experiences, right? So there is huge gains to be made sort of inside of silos and insides of systems of providing more efficiency, taking away mundane tasks. But I also think it's really important as agencies think more long-term about their digital transformation to think about the end-to-end constituent experiences, which might involve orchestrating a couple of robots, as well as some human work, as well as 5 other different systems, and building that end-to-end user experience, because that's ultimately where, both from a user and from a constituent perspective, you actually can not just drive efficiency, but you can actually drive a much better experience.
Harry, Don brings up a very interesting point, and it gets to kind of this idea of pilots and low risk and try it out and see how it goes. Are you guys there yet? Have you guys started to do some tests with automation? Again, I know you could be anything from the laser guided currency mover to more of the business on the business side.
Yeah, I think, as I mentioned earlier, the proof of concepts which we create, it's always good to create a proof of concept because overall it reduces risk. And then you're able to really prove it. Is it going to be successful within the agency or not? So with the proof of concepts, it's really helped us to sort of a break point. Is it going to assist us? Is it going to help us with the sort of change management, user adaptation? So we do that currently. And other thing which has worked is really providing the data, the right data to the right people. That's at our user stakeholders. Before our SCADA or manufacturing or engineering, there have been silos looking at only their data. But when you share the enterprise data with them, which is across the enterprise, they're able to correlate the data. So if it's looking at temperature data, humidity data, within a section, how does it impact the production process or the paper itself?
You bring up data. That's actually a great point. Maybe we'll get that into the next segment, but let's take a quick break. You're listening to The Journey to Technology, Modernization, and Government, sponsored by PEGA on Federal News Radio, part of the Federal News Network.